on and you're completely incapable, there's no opportunity to stop it. And my family was a very close family. We were close. My siblings are close, the three of us, and we were close, of course, with my mother and my grandmother and our aunts and uncles. And it was devastating. And I think perhaps what's important to talk about here is the very specific ways that family members are impacted. The family members' lives stop too, right? Our loved ones are imprisoned on the inside, but then we are imprisoned right along beside them on the outside. There's no going on with your life as if it's not happening. There's no leaving your loved one behind in prison, to fend for her or himself. And so, for my siblings and my grandmother, and to some extent my mother's brothers and others, our lives stopped in that moment and became about how we were going to free Mom. Mm-hmm. And so, the typical things that we might have done: finish school, fall in love, get married, have children, start jobs, have careers, save money, buy houses, all of those things were interrupted. I was in my mid-20s when this happened. My brother was a little older. My sister was a little younger, but I was 40 when it was over. And so the opportunity to have the life that, I at one time dreamed of having, or the life that I would have had, that was gone. And more than that, I think what we see, and I know that what we experienced, is just layer after layer after layer of trauma. There is the trauma of someone you love being wrongly accused, and you're wrongly accused right along beside them. And then there's the trauma of the trial, and there's the trauma of the guilty verdict, and then there's the trauma of seeing your loved one taken, in shackles to the prison. And then there's the trauma of visiting them in prison and all of the horror, right? And we went every single week, for all of those years. And there is the trauma with every appeal. You're hopeful, right, that you're going to be seen and you're going to be heard, and the injustice is going to be corrected and your loved one's going to be freed. And then, you're kind of slammed back with each refusal of the court to aid your loved one. And so there's just, and of course, all of the holidays, that are spent in the prison and not together. And then the loved ones you lose along the way. I think for our family, one of the greatest ways we were robbed is that my mother's mother, with whom we were all very close, and of course my mother especially so, was able to last until my mom came home. But then she died within a few months after, right? And so there was all of that time lost, in this state of misery and no chance to recover together and celebrate. So there are just many, many ways that that family members are injured again and again and again alongside their loved ones in prison. And it's one of the things that Healing Justice is trying to both assess and address.
Oh, that was a great segue. All right. So in 2013, at an Innocence Network conference, the first seeds were planted, which resulted in the formation of your project, Healing Justice. Now, I'd love for you to tell us about how that happened.
Absolutely, but I'm going to invite Jennifer to really share the details of the story. But I will start by saying that I went on after my mom's case to work on additional cases, and then later became a board member of the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, and then the executive director of the Rocky Mountain Innocence Project, and then later went on to the Innocence Project, and then, of course, now to Healing Justice. But the point is that I met Jennifer through this work, and like so many innocence lawyers, I looked to Jennifer to come and educate my community about mistaken eyewitness identification. And so when I was with the Rocky Mountain Innocence Project, Jennifer came out to do a training, and we became fast friends. And really, it was in that moment that I realized that crime victims and survivors were hurt in these cases as well. I don't think that I understood it completely. I knew when we were working on cases and seeking DNA testing that clearly there was going to be a hurtful impact on the families and the survivors in these cases, if we discovered that there had been that our clients were innocent and that there had been a wrongful conviction. But we always felt like we were doing right by the crime victims, right, to bring these cases forward because perhaps we'd find the actual perpetrator. I don't think I realized just how much the exoneration work that we were doing all around the country at the time was re-victimizing and re-traumatizing crime victims and survivors. And then, of course, we were inviting everyone was inviting Jennifer Thompson all around the country, really all around the world, to come tell her story for the purposes of our policy reform work. And it was in that moment of working with Jennifer in Utah that I realized her story was so much greater than she had been permitted to tell, and that she had been hurt in ways that people hadn't been interested in hearing. And so, Jennifer, maybe you can describe that moment at the Innocence Network conference in 2013.
Yeah. It was such a turning point for me because, as Katie said, for years I had been, taken all over the country, all over Canada and parts of Europe and Mexico to tell this story. And what I didn't even know myself was how much trauma I was causing my own body, my own mind, by retelling the story over and over again. Every time I told the story, every time I tell the story, I have to re-trigger my brain. I have to go back into a space that is really very painful to go back to. And I thought that I was supposed to do it. I thought that it was my obligation, my penance, so to speak. And so I was required, from myself to do this work. And it wasn't until 2013 that Katie decided to have the first ever victims panel at a conference. And it was really this opportunity to have people hear from the experiences of crime survivors from a wrongful conviction case. So she invited myself and 2 murder victim family members to come. And all 3 of us thought, well, this is just going to be another one of those things where we're going to be asked to tell our story, and you do it. But at the beginning of the panel, Katie begins to facilitate, and she asked this question that literally gutted all of us. And the question was, how has the wrongful conviction harmed you? And no one had ever asked me that question.
Really?
As far as I was being told, the only person harmed had been Ronald. The only person harmed had been Ronald's family. And I hadn't ever talked about my own personal harm. I'd been telling a narrative that was really about Ronald being innocent, Ronald going to prison, Ronald being exonerated. But there was really no space in that story for me to talk about what had happened to me and the things that people had said to me and the people that hadn't been there for me and the people that had asked too much of me. And when Katie asked this question, I just started to cry. I literally couldn't speak. And the other 2 crime survivors began to cry. And it was the first time anyone had ever asked us what had happened to us because of the wrongful conviction. And it would be later during that conference that I would sit down with other crime survivors and start to talk about the experiences within our own lives and within our own families about what had happened. And it was the catalyst, honestly, of healing justice. I didn't know it, and we hadn't named it at the time, but it was the beginning of thinking about what would a space look like for all harmed individuals from these cases. I'd been meeting crime survivors for years. People would reach out to me because the book, crime survivors would call my publisher and say, please, I need to talk to her. Her story is my story. And I would talk to rape survivors from wrongful conviction cases that were on the verge of suicide. I would talk to murder victim family members who just didn't have a voice in the narrative. I would talk to exonerees and their mothers and their children and their siblings. And what you really realize is this crossover of harm for everybody. It's the lost years. It's the not being able to trust the system. It's family members not understanding our pain. It's so much. It's so complicated.
Right.
And so 2013 just really was the beginning of healing justice. And we wouldn't launch it until 2015, but it was the beginning of what this space would look like.
All right. All right. So this is a perfect way to close out our segment. And then I want you both, of course, to return so we can continue talking about healing justice. And I thought it would be a good idea to give your website in case people would like to learn more for themselves. So would you tell us what that is?
Sure. Absolutely. healingjusticeproject.org. All together, www.healingjusticeproject.org.
Right. Okay, wonderful. All right, so we will pick this up next time. I'm sure our listeners have gained a great deal from the two segments we've already done, and please come back and join us on Pursuing Justice. We will see you next time, and thank you from all of us to both of you, Jennifer and Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you.